And we'd like to welcome back Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, owner and CEO of the Lincoln-Goldfinch law firm in Austin. And she is here this morning to talk to us about the issues that are happening on the border. News is breaking as we speak about the Governor Abbott refusing to take down the barrier that is in the river. Good morning, Kate.
Hi, good morning.
So get us up to speed, Kate, on what you know of this, and you know, I believe the DOJ was threatening to sue the state of Texas.
Yes, and they did yesterday. So Greg Abbott has placed these floating buoys right down the middle of the Rio Grande in certain parts of the river, and they have razor wire on them, and they have netting below them, so that if someone, you know, tries to cross them or gets entangled, they could very easily drown. And in fact, has probably happened at this point. Abbott did not coordinate with the federal government of either Mexico or the United States. And so both of those federal governments have spoken out against the practice for lots of reasons. It's, you know, for legal reasons, it violates certain international treaties and federal laws. For environmental reasons, it can impact the water flow and flooding. And for, you know, obvious humanitarian reasons, these devices have already caused many injuries, and there are big concerns about them. So last week, the government of Mexico, the Secretary of Foreign Relations, said this violates our treaties, and also the Department of Justice told Abbott that they would sue him on Monday, yesterday, if he did not take them down. And he responded by saying, "I'll see you in court." And so that's what's happening. There's a standoff. There has been a lawsuit filed in federal court. And so the courts will be working this thing out.
Now, this morning I heard on one news report that Abbott's response to all of this is that he has the sovereign right to do this. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, he wrote a letter where he pulled out a clause of the Constitution, which, you know, I went through his letter, and he pulled some cases, and none of the citations that he used spoke for the argument that he was making, in my, you know, assessment as a lawyer reading his argument. So the clause of the Constitution actually speaks about how states will not, you know, assert rights over the federal government. And then he talked about a certain case having to do with whether or not the federal government can force Texas guardsmen to take the COVID vaccine, you know, as an argument to why he has the authority to place these buoys in the river. So I think it's a very much of a reach legally that he has any type of authority. And I think from my perspective, the courts will enjoin this policy, will make him remove the buoys. But in the meantime, you know, apart from the humanitarian issues, he's spending so much money. I mean, $10 billion so far of Texan taxpayer money on this Operation Lone Star that has accounted to less than 1% of the apprehensions at the border. So it's not making a dent. And now, you know, these lawsuits and defending this lawsuit, which he will ultimately lose, is costing more taxpayer money. And the money so far that he's spent accounts for 1/6 of the overall education budget, just to give some context of how much money is being spent on this, really for, in my opinion, Greg Abbott's political gain at the end of the day. He is the person who benefits from all of this.
Well, when did this this system of buoys and barbed wire go up? I mean, it seems to have just appeared quite suddenly.
Yes, it's recent. Yeah, it's recent. I mean, the Operation Lone Star activities have been going on for a couple of years now, and those have been, you know, sending guardsmen to the border and, you know, trying to sort of charge migrants with trespassing, but a lot of those criminal charges have fallen off, you know, for due process reasons. So it's been just sort of a failed effort, one thing after another, and this is the latest. These buoys are the latest, and, you know, really one of the most egregious things that I've seen as a border lawyer. There were whistleblower reports of guardsmen who spoke out and said, we can't can't do this. We've crossed the line. We're being told not to give dehydrated migrants water. We're being told to push mothers and infants and children back into the river. We're seeing children get injured, and we can't, in good conscience, follow these orders that we've been given. So this is really beyond, the step beyond anything that we've seen so far. And I think that's why we're seeing both the governments of Mexico and the United States step in and say, wait a minute, we are not in agreement with these activities, because really this has crossed a line.
Now, when you're talking about the numbers of people coming across the border, you hear numbers like 100,000 to 100,000 in a month, and then you hear another report saying the numbers are down 30%. What's accurate?
Well, so the numbers are down, but a lot of what's happening is due to Title 42. And you might recall that for 3 years, we closed the border completely to asylum seekers under Title 42, this COVID protection policy. And that was lifted in May because it had to be, because we can't, use COVID policies to enforce border policies long term. That doesn't work. And so there was a lot of, to be expected, confusion and chaos surrounding the shifting policy, where we'd had a closed border for 3 years, and now we might be processing asylum seekers again. So we saw a temporary, spike related to that has sort of settled out now. We're 2 months out. And, there's a lot at play. There are some of Biden's border policies say that migrants can apply for asylum, but they have to wait their turn and using this app. It takes about 2 months for people to get an appointment. Some other migrants in Mexico are being apprehended and sent back into the interior of Mexico. So there's a lot happening, but here's what I'll say. I've been doing this for over 15 years, and there are ebbs and flows always in migration related to what's happening in the globe. There might be a political uprising in Venezuela, or gang violence happening in Central America, or an earthquake in Haiti. And so it's natural that we see rises and falls related to seasons and goings on politically. And we've seen that in the 70 years that we've been granting asylum to people, and it's natural. But, in general, what I would say is what we need to do to resolve the issue overall is two things. We need to provide a way for asylum seekers to be screened for asylum. And that means they can just come up to the bridge and say, I am afraid of returning to my country. Will you screen me? We had that for 20 years, and it functioned well. And the second thing that we need to do is an overall immigration review by Congress that passes a law to accurately reflect the needs of our economy. Because the reality is we have an aging population, we have a need for immigrant labor, but we don't have laws that provide ways for immigrants to come here legally. So there's this economic need without the legal response that's creating more problems for us.
And Kate, one argument always is that why can't they stay in Mexico until they are vetted?
Sure, and we've tried that. We had something called the Migrant Protection Protocol that sent migrants back to Mexico. What I can tell you, I've worked with, a lot of these migrants, and you have to remember, they are not Mexican, right? They are refugees in Mexico. And many of them are in danger still from the same dangers that they fled, but also the cartels along the southern border have seized upon migrants as a money-making scheme. And so they routinely will kidnap them, hold them for ransom, and violence of, all sorts of horrific things happen to these poor migrants who have only fled danger from their home country to arrive in Mexico and find worse danger. And I have lots of anecdotal stories talking to people who have themselves suffered these attacks. So they're not safe. They're not safe in Mexico. They don't have homes in Mexico. And they're seeking asylum in the United States. And the reality is that, look, not everybody is going to qualify for asylum. So if we can get to an orderly way to process asylum seekers and screen them, send the people home who don't qualify. But the ones who do qualify, allow them to come in and prepare for their hearings. And studies in the past have shown that over 90% of immigrants who seek asylum and pass a screening interview show up at their final interview because they have incentive to do that. They get legal status if they win their case. And so we had a system that worked. We've been messing around with it since Trump and MPP and Title 42 and all of that. And all of these little things that we're doing to tinkering are just creating more confusion and chaos when what we need to do is just go back to where we were. And, you know, this is the United States of America. We can handle processing and screening asylum seekers at our southern border.
And then there's always the argument and the fear. There's human trafficking. There's drugs coming across the border. What do you say about that?
Sure. I mean, that's a reality. And what I'll say is just, keeping in mind that the desperate, homeless migrants who are doing everything they can to get themselves to safety, they are not the human traffickers and the drug smugglers and the criminals and cartels. They are the victims of those very people, right? So we do need to protect our borders from drug smuggling and human trafficking. That is a separate and distinct issue from migrants who are fleeing violence.
Well, we have been speaking this morning to Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, and she is the owner and CEO of the Lincoln-Goldfinch law firm in Austin, Texas. And Kate, thank you for being with us. Where can our listeners go for more information?
Sure, thanks for having me on. It's my last name, Lincoln-Goldfinch.com, and you can find me on all the socials.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kate.